Where are you? It looks very beautiful in
And
your background.
tropical, right? Yeah, it's that vacation I was hoping to take this year, but probably next year.
Well, first and foremost, thank you for taking the time to chat with me today. We've known each other for a couple years now, having met through another great organization, Women Tech Founders. And I don't know if you remember that we were like the stage managers way back in the day when we actually had conferences.
Yes, when we actually did things in person and met together and worked together, I know. I actually miss a lot of that, just kind of being part of a team. But just coming back to the initial intro, but it's my pleasure. We've known each other, as you said, for a while. So happy to have this conversation, share some of my background, things I've done. And yeah, and sorry, you'll see my dog sort of popping in between, but
Okay.
yeah,
Everybody here is a dog lover.
exactly. Thank you. And it's, post-pandemic life's very different, but yeah, happy to be a part of this and happy Friday.
Yes, happy Friday. So, one of the things I wanted to touch upon was that you're one of the first women that I'm interviewing that's coming to us from a corporate America perspective.
Yep.
So, up to this point, it has been entrepreneurs, folks that have, left corporate to start their own practices. And I think what's really great about having you on today is that you're pretty high up on the food chain when it comes to corporate America in a executive badass trailblazing type of way. And so
Yeah.
I'm sure your experience is very different from some of the other women that I interviewed. And obviously being a person coming from India directly and, dealing with an industry that's so male dominated, just like mine.
Yep.
I'm sure you've had a lot of successes along the way. I'm sure you've had some challenges along the way. But before we even get into all that, tell us a little bit about you. Tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and a little flavor of Deena, if you will.
Absolutely. So I have about 20 plus years of global experience in strategy and operations, helping companies, as you said, in corporate America, scale for growth through transformation and innovation. So what that means is sort of honing in a lot of very different functional experiences that I've had across everything from project to program to product management to change management, Six Sigma and quality, strategy, of course, through consulting, bringing all of that together to operate in a very global environment and through a lot of different industries, some of which you touched upon. And so to build up a little more on what you said, you mentioned India. And so my global background comes from being born and raised in Kuwait, getting my higher education in India, then moving to the US, but also simultaneously managing a lot of teams in, you name it, Singapore, China, Japan, Barcelona, Ireland, Jordan, customers in Russia, South Korea. So that global experience definitely has been of great benefit, and I've kind of leveraged that in every role I've played, and has helped me work across a lot of industries, male dominated, of course, like technology, but also very different, like the food industry, McDonald's,
Mhm.
or consulting, Accenture, where you get all kinds of diversity, but it's also it's very very hardcore and constantly changing, almost similar to a startup in that environment. And at the leadership level, sometimes fairly male dominated too. So all these have sort of given me that ammunition and that energy to kind of take on new roles. So especially the one now at Microsoft, where I'm leading the transformation management office, which is leading teams in portfolio and change management for this massive transformation that we are doing, focused on the customer experience. It is meant to, honestly, and it's close to my heart, but it's meant to revolutionize the way we look at the customer and bring them the experience that they're looking for.
So I have to stop you there right for a minute because Microsoft just told me I have an update that I need to take advantage of. Is that what you're working on in the transformation management team?
You're not the first person or the last
And I'm
person
joking.
to me about Microsoft or Teams. No, I have it. People, when I walk my dogs, they're like, by the way, Teams. And as soon as they start, good or bad, I'm like, I don't work with any of that. The part of the transformation management office is, though, not related to the products directly,
Okay.
but related to the customer experience altogether. So whether it's buying product or the support contracts to maintain that product ongoing, it's about how do we create that better experience so they not only enjoy the products, but the continued relationship that they have with us. And so you have to tackle it from the customer point of view, but also our internal employees who are working in customer facing roles. So pretty complex, pretty exciting, but and very people heavy.
I was going to ask you, last time we spoke, I think you had brought on a couple new employees under your management directive. How big is your team now?
So now I have about 5 people reporting into me. And because I said I have 2 functions, I have a couple in portfolio management and the rest of them in change management. The way I've liked to build it, and my manager has been super supportive of it, is it's a mix of internal, external. So you get to see that outside in perspective and also the inside out. There's a lot of worthwhile experience that you need about how the company and the culture operates. So you need that internal view. But externally, everyone's bringing in so much experience from different industries that could completely be transferable to Microsoft. So I love having that mix. And so it's 5 people now. We're at the start of our fiscal, so I'm hoping I'm going to be able to at least double that team because there's
Wow.
so much work.
Double the team.
Well, it's a multi-year transformation, so there's so much work to come. And as much as we're trying to be efficient about it, in how we staff our team, there's just so much to be done. And then that's why it's a startup in a large company. So you talked about corporate America, but we work completely like a startup in a large company. So I love that energy and that constant change and motion that's happening. And so, hey, if you want to make a lot of things happen quickly at speed and at scale, yeah, you need people to do it. So I'm hoping that's what that next year is going to look like.
And I know you've mentioned when we've tried to get together that you sometimes have calls in the evening. So you're dealing also with different, countries, different time zones?
Absolutely. And so that's the good and the bad of it. The good is McDonald's, Groupon, Motorola before that, now Microsoft, the teams are all very global. What the pandemic has additionally added to the whole flavor is Microsoft and tech companies especially are no longer looking for you to be married to a location or headquarters. So we are hiring from everywhere. So I have a team member who's in Germany.
Oh, how cool.
Yeah, so I hired him. He's from Microsoft already, but he's in Germany. I have other team members across the US, and I could be potentially hiring more. And if they're not directly in my team, they're still part of the work. Like I spoke to someone who's in Egypt, who's part of my peers team. And so you have to have these long, almost back-to-back calls that go beyond the normal work hours because we have to make our time zones flex. So
That's got to be really difficult to coordinate.
But what's good about having dogs or for others kids is it kind of puts very clear limits on that chunk of time that you can spend, because I can only start working at X time. Like, guess what? I got to take them out for walks. I have to stop at X time because guess what? They need to go out for walks. So it puts at least some boundaries on what I do. And the rest of it has to be enforced by us. So I try not to work on weekends when possible. I try to stop at that point with them. But if I need to get back, I get on back for a little bit and not overextend myself too much.
And I think that's one of the benefits that came out of the pandemic, right? Is corporate America needed to loosen up a little bit.
Yes,
I know from the banking perspective, Jamie Dimon's taking his employees back to the office full time, and I don't think I would be willing to do that. So I think it's great that it's giving you the flexibility as a manager to hire people in other states, but also to tap into talent all over the United States as well.
Absolutely. It's an upside, if you can call an upside to a pandemic, but it's the upside that I personally would not have necessarily thought of applying to Microsoft right off the bat, because in my head it was, well, I'd have to move to Seattle, and I didn't know how ready I was for that, given just I love being in Chicago. I've spent many years here, and Seattle is pretty expensive. So from all that perspective, when they said, no, you just stay where you are and there's absolutely no need to move, that was phenomenal. It opened the door to not just Microsoft, but other companies in California that I was interviewing with. And so I almost interviewed exclusively with companies that weren't in Chicago. And now for my team, the same way. I'm not forcing them to go back to work. They can work from wherever they want.
But you have to be honest though, don't you miss getting the free cheeseburgers every day at McDonald's?
That's a whole other discussion on how that led me to a healthy regime and getting on keto and getting so healthy because of all the cheeseburgers that kind of forced that issue. But
Right.
that, so instead of adding the COVID-19, I lost the COVID-19 and more. And so there was an upside from that perspective, but the cheeseburgers led to that. So
Yeah, I don't know if I could handle that and have the willpower, but
yeah.
that was just throwing that out there.
Well, eating all the cheeseburgers led to the weight loss that I needed to have. So there wasn't willpower. The willpower forced a different issue. The lack of willpower forced a different issue.
Well, I know we're doing this via Zoom, but obviously when we met in person recently, you looked amazing. I didn't even recognize you. You walked
Thank
up to
you.
the dock and I was like, is that Deena?
Yeah, I know. I was like, people just stop me even now. They're like, wait, did you lose a lot of weight? I'm like,
You're
yeah.
like, no.
Yeah, it's like, well, yeah.
You look great. Whatever you're doing, keep it up.
Thank you.
What are some of the things that you love about working for Microsoft or just in general in corporate America and such a high level within a company like that?
So there are a few things I look for. I think as I've gotten older and got more experiences, there are a few things I look for in a company, in a role that I think is important for me to look for and to keep me there and to keep me motivated. And that is, one is the company culture.
For sure.
And yes, and Microsoft's culture, and I'm happy to confirm whatever I heard about from others, from employees, from reading, is pretty true. It's a culture really focused on diversity and inclusion. It's a culture that's very open to being yourself. And I have noticed that I can be honest about different things. What I like, don't like, I can talk to my manager about it. She encourages it. I can talk to my peers about it.
From previous experience, that's not always been the case.
Exactly. It has, it's been a roller coaster for me in different jobs to have different elements of that. And I've thrived where I've been able to be myself. And so that's one part of just the environment letting me be myself. But the second piece is the company itself. We had a 2-day diversity and inclusion event called Include that we had such a wide range of topics, including um, sort of, and having leaders like Michelle Obama come in and talk about what that meant to
Oh,
them.
cool.
Oh yeah. And we had other leaders in the industry and in that D&I space come and talking about diversity from all aspects, be it, talking about the transgender experience, talking about being like me, a triple minority and what that could look like. And so just everyone found representation. That was amazing to see. And our leaders encouraged us to take the time off all 2 days if we needed to attend every event.
Wow. You don't hear of that often.
It was phenomenal. So it was so much uh, more than just verbal, service. And it was actually in what we did. We have weekly, bi-weekly, actually twice a week, gratitude calls where we get on a call and we talk about sort of everything that's not work and what we're grateful for.
I
We get
love
to chat
that.
and talk to each other because most of us like me have not met our new colleagues. So
Right.
this is how we've built that network and that environment where we support each other so much. So one team member, and not directly my team, it's actually a broader organization. So she came and she said she's 20 years cancer free, but she thinks she's 20 years cancer free, but she was having her checkup at Mayo the following week. And the words of encouragement from her, she said it held her through that whole process. And she came back and reported back she is better than ever. And so those things sort of build that relationships. We have no meeting gratitude Fridays every first and third Friday of the month. Like, so these are things that may not seem like a lot, but they matter on an ongoing basis. And so
And I
not
think
to
they
take,
matter more because you're so remote from each other.
exactly. And so that the culture piece was one. The second was the ability to have an impact. When you are in a leadership position, you have an ability to impact the work that you're doing. How is it going to make a difference? Can you get involved in things that'll make a difference to others? So I just got included in a women's ERG. I'm involved in a lot of other ERGs, which are employee resource groups.
Okay.
And so different groups focused on everything that you can think of. And being, able to sort of share my experiences with young women coming in, share my experiences with people who are minorities or who come in from other countries. You talked about coming from India. How do you kind of navigate it when you don't necessarily have that network built in from having grown up here? So
Mhm.
being able to help and have that impact on that level, have an impact to the work, to all the experience I bring in, it's critical for me to be in those roles. And so I've been able to get those at Microsoft. Yeah.
Well, it sounds like a great place to work.
Yeah.
I would love to know, we talk a lot about women in STEM, and you have an engineering background.
Yeah.
Any words of advice to maybe a younger gal, a younger Deena, of what you may have wished you knew then that you know now?
One, that being a nerd is actually cool. No, but jokes, but jokes aside, I would tell, especially I see it a lot more in the US than say in India. It is, it doesn't matter if it's not cool to like some of these things when you're growing up. If it's something you really like to do, continue to do it because we so need many more women in STEM. I'll give you an example. I loved math most of my life, still do. And people are like, really? Especially in the US, really? Yeah. And so I continue to love it. And the way I've just lived my life personally was, I don't care if anyone thinks it's cool or not. I enjoy it.
Right.
But if you as a young girl or a young woman have interest in those things, continue to go, ignore the naysayers, ignore anyone bullying you or thinking it's not cool. It doesn't matter. Right now, the uncool people, they're ruling the roost and they're the ones having the last laugh. And I think the
And
environment
making the
today,
money too, right?
exactly, and the environment is such that technology is so important and is going to continue to be important because of the pandemic
Right.
that I think it's only going to be here to stay. So it's
I
never
totally agree.
going
I
away.
totally agree. When I look at some of my clients that have younger children and we talk about college planning being far off, I don't know if that's going to be a real issue, a real option
No,
in 15 years. I would much rather see these kids go to coding school, or,
exactly.
or into engineering or into mathematics, because
Correct.
that's where they're going
Yeah.
to have a better opportunity to
Yes.
be ahead of the curve, to exactly what you said, because everything is about innovation.
It is. It's focused on innovation. If it's not this form of technology, it's a new form of technology. If it's not formal degrees, it's informal coding classes, like you said. The opportunity is massive. So you have a lot more avenues because we also are just speaking, assuming that the young women, even if they have an interest and they have everything, like we don't care. Even if it's uncool, they may not be financially able to to get a degree. But now there are opportunities to go do coding and things like that because school in the US compared to say in India is much more expensive.
Mhm.
And so not everybody can. But today, even companies are not expecting you to have a 4-year degree. But if you bring innovation, if you bring that creative thinking, if you are willing to work outside and think outside the box, they absolutely want that because they're the ones who can
It's
break
so
through.
different from what you and I had when we first came out of college, right? I mean, it was like, you need to
Yes.
go and get your bachelor's degree. You need to go and get, and nowadays that's not
I
necessary.
mean, even Microsoft, like it's about who are the innovators, who are the thinkers, all the tech companies. They're like, we want, yes, there's a set of traditional skills or routes that you have, but you want to mix it up with the non-traditional too. So there's a lot of avenues right now. So to the young women, just ignore anything but what you want to do.
I think that's great advice. I think
Yes.
that's
I mean,
really good advice.
that's to me, that's how I think any of us can be successful long term. You can get small successes doing stuff that you don't want to do, but long term, if you want to sustain the success, you've got to do what's exciting to you.
Right. Well, and along those lines, then let's kind of switch gears and talk about some of the obstacles or maybe challenges that you've encountered in your career as a woman. You've mentioned a couple times now that you have a female boss. I mean, that can always go one way or the other way. So, what would you share with us on that?
So yes, I'll kind of talk about three different. One of it is corporate America. The second is maybe not completely corporate America, but some of the challenges I faced when one is exactly as you said. So I mentioned earlier I'm a triple minority now. So one female, non-white. The third is over 40, and so together.
Oh, wow, I didn't know about that one. I guess.
Yeah, that I think Illinois even has a law, a rule along those lines on the age factor. So when you're like a triple minority, even though I am at a level that you, as you were saying, is not, it's fairly good. It's good. There's a huge disadvantage. That's not always easy to overcome, and not every environment allows you to succeed, and you have to really push much harder against some of them. There's a book I read not too long ago by Minda Harts called The Memo:
Okay.
What Women of Color Need to Know to Secure a Seat at the Table. And so, yeah, and that book, I mean, it talks about how there are lots of things that happen, some very obvious, some not, that all invariably lead to you having to have a much tougher fight
Mm-hmm.
to get to the same place where others can get to easier. So it's a reality that you have to look at the culture of the company, you know, not only because I've worked for many years, but sometimes that is critical in how much success is dependent on others beyond just you.
Right.
And so, and if you don't scratch that surface even during an interview, as an example, and you don't find that out, sometimes, as has happened in my past, you get into a company that does not value what you bring to the table. Because diversity, honestly, diversity of thought, diversity of leadership, diversity of backgrounds, everything only adds to the strength of the team and the work you do and the work you bring out. Not if the company doesn't see that. So I've had that situation. So that's been an obstacle.
Mm-hmm.
Moving
That's one
between,
that I've faced in the financial services industry as well.
exactly,
Predominantly old school white man. It's their way or the highway thinking. And Mel, you know, you're too loud. We need you to.
exactly. Oh my God, why are you asking all these questions? Or, oh my God,
Differently.
why are you aggressive? Like, you know, so they might seem like tropes, but they still hang around depending on which company and which job you're at. They bring you in asking you to bring the change, but when you bring the change, oh, guess what? It wasn't the amount of change we needed, and whoops, now you're just making us, you know, uncomfortable.
You're just checking our box.
Right. And I was a part of a team in a senior role, reporting to a very senior person, where I was the only woman on his team, and the second person of color. And even then, so that would says everything, but even more so was the check the box feeling that you always got.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that resulted in, you know, sort of how, you know, I had to look for something else also at the end of it. But that was one. Another thing was moving between different functions, uh, when, you know, and trying something new has not always been easy. As much as people talk about, you know, we'd love you to bring in a lot of varied experiences. And if you see, I talked about all these different functions I worked in.
Mm-hmm.
It was not an easy path. I had to, in some situations, take maybe a step back. In other situations, I had to fight tooth and nail to and convince people why I could transfer some of these skills into these new roles. So that's not been easy. And when you move countries, when you move industries, which I've done all of, you continue to add that layer of complexity to the person in front of you who wants an exact mold of maybe who they are or what they think is going to fit. And when you start pushing those boundaries and those lines, it's and that paradigm, people get uncomfortable. So that's definitely been a challenge. And the third one that's related to probably other people you've spoken to is how hard it was for me to, and I still haven't, find that right opportunity in a startup or a growth stage company
We've talked about that quite a bit.
Chicago.
Yeah.
I don't know about other states, other cities, but oh my God, if you don't have your network or your contacts that you grew up with, went to school with, started something with, guess what? You don't get past that front door.
Right.
And I have spent years, in fact, that's how Women Tech Founders was one of the avenues I was trying to find my foot in the door. Um, and that's where we met. But unless you're someone starting something new, and then of course you get visibility. But if you are part of corporate that wants to maybe take that step in, or even wants to maybe be an investor, whatever it is that's a massive obstacle that I can say even now I've not gotten past.
Well, and we know the stats too, right? I mean, how many women in Chicago get funding? Like less than 1%, and
4% if it's outside, you know, the whole all of the U.S.
Right. So it's I can.
Yeah.
I know we've talked about that quite a bit. I know you've wanted to work for some smaller companies, but at the end of the day, you know, it sounds like you found a good home with Microsoft. It seems like based on everything you just said, they're giving you the ability to be creative.
Mm-hmm.
They're bringing more to the table than just work.
Yes.
And it sounds like you've got a really good gig there.
And if I continue to look at opportunities, because that's the other wonderful thing about Microsoft is they're like every 2 to 3 years, go try something new within the company. And so if I continue,
Fantastic.
oh yeah, they encourage you to do it. And so I want to keep looking for where else can I get the startup environment, or even there's parts of the company that are investors into startups. There are many ways I can parlay this within Microsoft, but it's not an either or, but at one point when I was looking at startups or smaller companies to be able to help grow them and scale them, because that's a huge part of my experience, kind of taking Series C or D companies and making them grow. Like I said, it wasn't the easiest thing. And so sometimes it just didn't make sense to hit my head against a brick wall. So.
Right, right. Okay, well, obviously one of the reasons I'm doing this series is because a lot of my clients I have found through the Women in Tech space, and I find that they share some similar money habits. And
Yep.
so the third part of this interview is really around anything that you would like to share with our audience as far as money tips that you've learned along the way.
Sure. So I'll give you three, one of which I just kind of, we just kind of stumbled across in a sense, but something that I did that has been paying off. But the first one I'll say is negotiation. And I say it as a joke to my friends, but I say you have to put your man pants on in two ways. One, when you're looking for opportunities as women, we always apply for jobs that we're 100% fit for.
Right.
And I've spent the last 3-4 jobs and I made it a rule for myself. I will always apply for something where there's at least 30 to 40% of what I can do. I know I can do and I can transfer my skills, but I don't have the experience, and I'm going to make sure I get the job and I learn whatever else I need to learn. And that's what I've been doing from Groupon to everything beyond. And that also comes to negotiation. Never leave money on the table.
I agree with that.
Yeah. Almost no man does. And I know so many women who come and tell me, but it was such a great opportunity. I didn't feel it was right to ask for more money. I'm like, they never, and I'm on the other side giving offers too. So I know I never give them their best deal the first time around, because I want to see how much effort they put into pushing for what they think they deserve. And
it goes on both ends of that equation, not only for new opportunities, but if for whatever reason you find yourself in a situation where you've been let go or terminated, there's an opportunity there. I've had several
clients too. Exactly.
And last year, and they were just like, oh, I'm going to accept the severance package. I'm like, the heck you are.
Oh, I negotiated my severance package too. So I was very clear.
I agree with that. Negotiation on both ends of that.
Lawyer, I made sure I put the points that I needed to, and I definitely got more what I felt I deserved. And so on both ends, I think it's also not for you alone. I think what it tells others about you.
Agreed.
Because if the person in front of you recognizes that you know your worth and you're going to fight for it, I think that is an element of that person that I want in the job as well. Right. And secondly, if I'm that person as a boss who doesn't want to give you, I mean, you could be negotiating for 3 times what they gave you. That's never going to fly. Right. But if you're negotiating for something that seems reasonable, I, as a manager, am not willing to bend even a little, then to you as the candidate, that's a red flag. Right. You want to work for such a person who's not willing to flex, because that's going to play in every way in every day of your job. And so I think it's a great way to even evaluate your team, your manager, your employee. And so that's
on the self-worth, right?
Completely your self-worth, and then the people around you. Is that going to be an environment that I'm going to be able to push back on or negotiate? Because you're going to negotiate for everything in every job, right? It's about influence, especially the higher you go. Right. You're never going to have people working for you that you need to convince. It's always everybody else. And so all of that all the negotiation is going to be important. So that's one. Okay. And the second is what my Indian parents have always said, and I don't do enough of: save, save, save. This pandemic, this job loss that everyone's faced, I mean, don't get me wrong, I still do save, and you know this, I am your client. But you know this, but it blows my mind how much money we as Americans can spend on crap, and I've done it too. But I'm trying to get better at it, but saving for a rainy day, saving for investing, saving for some day that you might want to work in a startup that doesn't pay much. Right. I think saving a good chunk of your money and recognizing where you want to hold back, that you do really need to buy that third pair of shoes. but kind of making those decisions. And I'll confess, I'm not always good at it, and you can attest to that, but getting smarter about it, I think is important, especially as you get older. Hey, that timeline to retirement is not going to get longer.
No, yeah, it's not getting any longer. And it's funny you say all that because I sent out my newsletter this morning and it was all around how we are coming out of the pandemic and things are opening up. And here are some red flags on why you might be increasing your spending and what you can do about it. Because I think
yes,
it was a great opportunity for us to learn that, oh, shoot, maybe we were eating out a little too much or having a happy hour too much. And
yep.
so it gave us an opportunity to readjust our spending. And to your point, find ways to put more money into that emergency bucket, right?
I mean, if you look at all the jobs that we had to continue to as a country we had to help people stay afloat.
Mm-hmm.
Not that all of that would be relieved, but some of it could possibly be helped if those who can save could have. Now, don't get me wrong, all jobs are not paid equally, and so not everyone can save. But
Right.
those who can, should. And the third is I had, as you mentioned, lost my job before this one. And so for a certain amount of time, was not getting an inflow.
Right.
And so I did whatever I did at that point in time, kind of forbearance and things, and held off sort of paying stuff back. But the minute I got a job, I started paying back not just the minimum due or the loan amounts that are due every month, but some more on top of that, to the point that now 7 months into the job, I have paid off one loan, brought down two other loans significantly, closed out payments that I had on a lot of my credit cards. And so that amount of debt that I have is slowly closing down to just my mortgage. And that gives me such a sense of relief because I can now think of, hey, I can then now actually buy that bigger property that I wanted now that I have two dogs and parents coming to live with me, et cetera, et cetera. And so that was not possible with some of the debt I had. And so I think that discipline around maximizing it, and that's where also the saving matters, because then you can just put it into bringing down your debt, and then feeling a lot more, solvent in that sense.
Yeah, no, I think all three of those are really good pieces of advice.
Mhm.
And of course, just so the audience knows, I didn't prep you for any of those. But I mean, I think those are the financial foundations to being successful. Have an emergency savings, pay down your debt, save. I like to use the word pay yourself first, which you're doing a great job of putting money away into savings, into retirement, into health savings.
And the earlier you start, the better. I started later. I think you start in your 20s, which I didn't. I think it's so smart. I have other friends of mine who, as a couple, they started saving from the day they got married, and they've got kids' college funds squirreled away. Another couple I know, they're all three kids' college funds were paid off, and by 50 something, they both retired, and they were making money off of sort of stock market and stuff. And they bought this big place in Colorado. They're renting out part of their, home and stuff like that through Airbnb. And so supplemental income is all the income they need now.
Right.
And so that's a dream for me. If I were smarter about it, then that's where I could be today. And so,
and I'm a big believer not beating ourselves up, right? Sure. I'm guilty of making money mistakes as well. And so, when we work together, I always say, let's leave behind the past and just work on how we can have a fresh beginning.
Absolutely. But if you're in your 20s and 30s, this is what you can get to.
Yeah, and I wish I would have known better in my 20s and 30s too.
Right. I know. I think part of that's so important to just be educated, especially us as women who don't like to talk finance.
So taboo, right?
It's so, it's such a dirty word, but that's where you can be so financially independent. And I will say this, not to be some sort of a pat on the back, but then for me as a single woman, I know I don't fear not being able to take care of myself financially ever. So being in that place today or going forward, I think that's so important for us as women, especially if you're in a bad situation or you've lost a job or in a relationship you want to get out of, whatever it is.
Whatever. We all know that life throws us curveballs, right? I'm going to go ahead and plug that in right there. There's a lot of unexpected events that pop up.
Yeah. So financial security in that sense, I think is something, and I don't know why, but men to think about it a lot more inherently than women. And I think, hey, if we say we're equal, then guess what? then the finance
You
piece
need
of
to show up.
we need to show up and that's where we're equal too in thinking about it. So,
Well, on that note, I want to go ahead and say thank you again for your time.
pleasure.
Is there a place where you want people to be able to reach out to you? Do you want to leave your email or a phone number?
So you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I check that all the time. It's Deena John, and you'll see it's you'll see Microsoft as the company I'm working for, and happy to connect with anyone for any advice, chat, connect, grab a coffee, grab a drink. Happy to do that. But yeah, would love to. I love to build my network, so happy to engage. And thank you for this opportunity
Yeah,
to
absolutely right.
share sort of my background as well. Yes.
Yes. All right. Well, you have a wonderful weekend. Enjoy that beautiful weather behind you,
Thank
and we
you.
will see each other soon.
Thank you. Yes, absolutely. Take care, Mel. Thanks,
All right.
everyone.
You're welcome.